Think we are live. Just check it out on my other computer. Make sure it is broadcasting. Yes. All right. Screen share going, so I'm not just staring at my face. Ranger. There. Boom. And that's what I want y'all to look at. Not face. And I am just dropping the ball. All right. I hope everyone's doing well today. We will be going through 2 Kings chapter 3. It's essentially the continuation of the ministry of Elisha. He is continuing Elijah's ministry. Definitely an interesting and very applicable story to the world that we're living in today. It seems like pretty much every chapter that we've read over the last year is we've been able to say the same thing about. There's nothing I found in the scriptures so far that does not apply to us, other than maybe Mosaic law, although we can still derive a lot of wisdom from it if you read it from a humble place. But yeah, so 2 Kings chapter 3, just to give a little bit of background, Jehoram, who is the king of the northern kingdom of Israel, and Jehoshaphat, who is the king of Judah, which is the southern kingdom of Israel, are going to go to war against Moab. Moab was conquered by David, and I mean, this is a long time prior to this chapter that he conquered them, but in conquering them, they were a tribute was imposed upon them where they had to give an annual, I don't know whether it's gift or they had to pay an annual tribute of 100,000 sheep and the wool of 100,000 goats. And that carried on all the way up until the life of Ahab, and all throughout Ahab's his leadership over Israel carried on. And then Ahab died. Ahaziah took the throne, and as we learned in the previous chapters, he didn't last very long. He chose to go to Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, for a prophetic word, and because of that, his life was cut short. And so he didn't do anything about Moab's rebellion. After Ahab died, Moab rebelled, shook off the tribute that was imposed on them, and Ahaziah did nothing about it. But now Jehoram has taken the throne. Ahaziah had no sons, so this was a relative of Ahaziah, but it was not his son. So he has the same mom and dad as Ahaziah. So his mom and dad were Ahab and Jezebel. And although he was not nearly as wicked as Ahaziah or as Ahab or Jezebel, as we'll see in the first couple of verses, he put away the pillar that was made in honor of Baal, but he did not fully depart from the sins of his fathers. He continued in the sins of Jeroboam. Jeroboam was the first king over Israel when it was divided. The kingdom was, from the hands of Solomon, was divided from one united kingdom of Israel to the 10 kingdoms of the northern, or the 10 tribes, which went to the northern kingdom, and the 2 tribes, which went to the southern kingdom of Judah. So Jeroboam was the first king of the northern kingdom, the northern divided kingdom of Israel. And he was afraid that the people would not submit to him and instead would return to the house of David. So what he did was create a religion of his own. He turned immediately aside from Yahweh, and we don't need to go into too much detail because it has very little impact on the story for today, but he got into the religion of Jeroboam, which we can just summarize as idolatry, the worship of idols, and he caused Israel to sin. So once again, we have Jehoram, who is now carrying on that legacy and leading Israel into sin. It seems, however, though, that he's got a good rapport with King Jehoshaphat, who's the king of Judah, who is a righteous king, but as you will see pretty quickly in this chapter, he pretty seriously lacks discernment. And this is why I say it's very applicable to our lives today, because as I'm sure you've seen, heard, I just experienced in your life as a believer, there are a lot of people out there who just claim to be Christian. That's a very blanket statement. If you're in America, or an American, sorry, you kind of fall under this blanket of, oh yeah, you're an American, so you're a Christian. Well, that actually couldn't be further from the truth. And what you're seeing in the world today is America is trying its hardest to shake off that label and being covered under that blanket. I don't really love the term Christian. It's very much like a kind of a get out of spiritual jail free card. And it's applied to so many different individual sects and denominations of Christianity. It's like the term itself has lost all its meaning. It's now being paraded as a religion, which it in its essence, and by definition, Christianity means to follow Christ, or a follower of Christ. And that's it. It was not to be worn like a creed on a jacket. Just like, yeah, this is my country that I support. It was a lifestyle that you live. It's very much not supposed to be a religious practice, and that's what the world has turned it into. And what we'll see here is Jehoram. We have the reason to believe that he does most like many people who call themselves Christian, he does believe in Yahweh, the Elohim of the Old Testament and the New Testament. But simply believing that, it doesn't really mean squat. I mean, even Satan and the demons believe. And does that grant them their entrance into heaven? No, of course not. So simply believing does not mean anything. It's faith that makes all the difference in the world, because a lifestyle of true faith produces a much greater person than, or I say that not by any accomplishment of the person, but by the accomplishment of the one who the person has faith in. It yields a far greater result than just simply believing and going on to live your normal life as per the lusts of your individual flesh. Anyways, we have Anthony Burleson with us today, doing our reading as usual on Sunday. How is my audio? Am I coming through clear?
It's still kind of low, brother. I was gonna wait till after the streaming, but it's kind of like it usually is, but it's kind of low. I mean, it's probably if someone's listening at a computer or on headphones, they could hear you clearly, but I'm sure our levels are jumping all over the place.
Well, I was sitting back in my chair. There's probably a good 2.5
I still
feet.
think it's still, it would still, even when you get to your loudest, it's still kind of low compared to the, say like myself or Michael.
This is I figured out through some research. Zoom does, as we talked about, it automatically has a back end compressor software that it's supposed to run all connections. They're supposed to go through those same compression levels. So it should balance out. They don't give you access to the Zoom compressor to be able to change the.
It just when you're listening on like a cell phone or something like that, you can't really. It's hard to hear you.
All right, I'll be conscious of that and sit closer to my microphone because I can hear it in my headphones when I come in close like this. It's a more robust, full sound of my voice, whereas when I sit back, it's
a little gain would help.
My gain is cranked all the way up.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's on my radar here pretty soon to get a different microphone, as we've talked about, and
it might not be the mic; it might be a preamp or whatever.
Yeah, oh, I'm sure it has a lot to do with the preamp. My interface has got its own preamp. I wanted to upgrade my microphone and my preamp, and I'm thinking, I don't know, we don't need to go into the tech stuff of how I'm going to upgrade my podcast setup, but my eyes are on it. I'm trying to discern the best possible route for a nice clear stream where we can all be equal in volume. But yeah, do you want to recap chapter 2 before we get started here?
Yeah, we can recap chapter 2.
So what were some highlight points that you saw in chapter 2?
A lie to be carried off on a whirlwind. I think that's a very big one.
Yeah.
And just That chapter's a pretty big chapter. Elisha and Elijah and Elisha, the whole mantle being passed on. And yeah,
And we had
there's a
the people all came running out and saw clearly that the spirit of Elijah was upon Elisha, and they confessed it immediately.
Mhm.
But then they let doubt come into their hearts, like, oh, well, we have here 50 strong men with us. How about we just go check in the surrounding hills and valleys? Maybe it's possible that Yahweh brought him up in a whirlwind and set him down in a valley somewhere or on a peak. And Elisha's initial response was like, no, I know what I saw. And you guys had all heard the same thing from his mouth, that this was going to happen. And they just continued to pester him, like, oh, come on, just let us go. Why not? What's the harm? And finally, they wore him down. All right, fine, go check. And they looked for 3 days and did not find him. Which, as we discussed, I think was a parable to
Yeah.
Christ and his resurrection, and the gifting of the Holy Spirit to all who choose to believe in him.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Even Hollywood rips off this story. I think I've told you this, where E.T. is basically just a rip off of this chapter right here.
yeah, Elijah the Tishbite.
Yep, E.T. is Elijah the Tishbite. Elliot would be Elisha. Yeah, it's Hollywood's just ripping it off, but yeah.
And the other thing it was noteworthy, while he is carrying on, that's Elisha rather, is carrying on the ministry of Elijah with the passing of that mantle. He changes things pretty substantially. What we'll see in the coming weeks, Elijah, he kept to himself. He was oftentimes, or most of the time, I'll say, out in the wilderness alone on the mountaintops, just communing directly with Yahweh. But Elisha, he goes directly into the cities. So he's getting right up in the mix. And that's a parable in itself too. That's what we are supposed to do when we receive the Holy Spirit. We don't hide that light under a bushel. We put it on a lampstand and we go out and we fulfill our commission, and we broadcast the news of the Mashiach, of Christ, to everyone, whether they want to hear it or not. We get it out there, and it's on them whether they want to listen or not. But that's what we see and we will continue to see in the coming chapters of Second Kings, as he was diligent in the task that was given to him, and he carried that ministry proudly. We'll see in this chapter here in chapter 3, he was a bold man. He, just like Elijah, he said the hard things that would make you cringe. Like, wow.
Yeah, it could be argued that Elisha was even, harsher than Elijah.
Yeah. Yeah, seems like they're in competition on that aspect. Like they're chomping at the bit to say what needs to be said. I definitely love that about these two people in the Bible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think those were the main highlights. Really, the chief one was Elijah being taken up in the whirlwind, exactly as he had prophesied was going to happen. I mean, he didn't prophesy that he would be taken in a whirlwind, but Elisha knew that he would be taken, and it seems like all the sons of the prophets knew. But I think that's because he was doing his rounds, going to all these different people and telling them, like he was on his farewell tour saying goodbye to everybody. But
the splitting of the stream.
Yes.
both of that. And then the two she bears mauling the 42 children that mocked Elijah or Elisha for having a bald head.
Go up, you bald head.
Yeah.
Yikes. And that's what we talked about last week. Yahweh he is not mocked. And so we need not get upset when people insult the scriptures or insult us for our belief in Yahweh, because he can defend himself, and he has always. This is like the time of trying to grab any last souls to bring onto the ark before this door is sealed shut. And if we're easily triggered by that kind of stuff, then we're not going to find much success walking this path.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, let's see. This chapter is not really broken. Well, it's just not. It's not broken up at all. It's all one read. We want to read maybe 1 through 12, pause and discuss that, and then read 13 through the rest. There's only 27 verses.
Should we stop right there? Yeah, I guess that's. Yeah, 12.
All right.
It's kind of hard to break. It's kind of hard to break this one up if you're looking at it, brother. But
yeah, it's tough, but there's a lot of things that should be maybe just expanded upon before finishing out chapters. So I mean, 12 is about the midway point. That way we're not going back over all 27 verses.
All right. Well, I'm ready, brother. I'm reading from the BSB.
All right. I've got the NASB 95 pulled up. Let me change that to BSB.
I mean, I honestly think you should keep it there. I mean, I would like, people to actually read it and see if there's a difference and challenge, what's being, read, from a different version.
All right. Yeah, I like that. That's very good counsel.
All right. Here we go.
All right.
In the 18th year of Jehoshaphat's reign over Judah, Jehoram, son of Ahab, became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria 12 years. And he did evil in the sight of Yahweh, but not as his father and mother had done. He removed the sacred pillar of Baal that his father had made. Nevertheless, he clung to the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit. He did not turn away from them. Now Mesha, king of Moab, was a sheep breeder, and he would render to the king of Israel 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. But after the death of Ahab, the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. So at that time, King Jehoram set out from Samaria and mobilized all Israel. And he sent a message to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. The king of Moab has rebelled against me. Will you go with me to fight against Moab? I will go, replied Jehoshaphat. I am like you. My people are your people, and my horses are your horses. Then he asked, which way shall we go up? By way of the desert of Edom, replied Joram. So the king of Israel, the king of Judah, and the king of Edom set out. And after they had traveled a roundabout route for 7 days, they had no water for their army or for their animals. Alas, said the king of Israel, for Yahweh has summoned these 3 kings to deliver them into the hand of Moab. But Jehoshaphat asked, is there no prophet of Yahweh here? Let us inquire of Yahweh through him. And one of the servants of the king of Israel answered, Elisha, son of Shaphat, is here. He used to pour water on the hands of Elijah. Jehoshaphat affirmed, the word of Yahweh is with him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him.
So as we discussed there at the beginning, Jehoram was a better king over Israel than, say, Ahaziah, or marginally better maybe than Ahab. But as we've talked about in other previous studies, Israel falls into the same trap over and over and over and over again. They do away with some of their sin, but not all of it. They hold on to a little bit of that sin, and then again it takes root and bears more fruit, and each time it's a little bit worse than the last. So what we have here is Jehoram he's put away that sacred pillar of Baal, which is great, sure, but then to continue on in the sins of Jeroboam, it's still idolatry. It matters not what idol you serve or in what capacity you serve it. Sin is sin, and idolatry is idolatry. Each time it's going to leave you broken and empty-handed. And Jehoshaphat, as we said, is a pretty righteous king over Judah. We'll see that affirmed through the mouth of Elisha in a few verses here. But he lacks discernment pretty significantly. He makes a very hasty response to Jehoram's request for support in going to conquer Moab once again. Jehoshaphat doesn't say, let me speak with the prophets, let me pray about it. Nothing. He just says, yeah, my horses are your horses. Whatever you need, my people are as your people. Let's do this. And then even just like, which way should we go to get there? Now, it's kind of interesting. I believe this is a parable that can be expanded upon. If you look at a map, which I can definitely pull up a map, you can just Google and come up with a map very easily. But in the north, you have the northern kingdom of Israel, and below it, the southern kingdom of Israel. And directly to the east, you have Moab. Territory of Moab was just across the Jordan River. And they take this roundabout way through the land of the Edomites, which the Edomites were descendants of Esau. And they pick up the Edomites on their way to Moab. So they didn't consult Yahweh. They just went according to Jehoram's plan, and they're 7 days into their journey, and they have no water for their army, no water for their cattle. And we see that, while Jehoram does not practice faith in Yahweh, he is still in idolatry. He very quickly blames Yahweh. Surely Yahweh has brought us out here into the wilderness. He's gathered these 3 kings, referring to himself, the king of Moab, which is Misha and Jehoshaphat, to deliver us into the hands of the Moabites. And just for anyone who doesn't know, the Moabites were the descendants of Lot. This is the remnant of people that was born out of, I don't want to go too far into the story, but after Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed, Lot and his daughters survived, and they incestually took advantage of him after getting him drunk. And this was the beginning of the Moabites. Over time, these people continued to multiply and grew into this nation of people we know today as the Moabites, or not today, they no longer exist, but they had enough to have their own big territory, a pretty rich kingdom that they grew into. So Jehoram, while not consulting Yahweh about direction, ordering his steps, whether or not he is even to do this, if that tribute that Moab was paying was even rightfully should be given to him still, and he just takes it upon himself to go and do this. But then he immediately blames Yahweh. Surely he's brought us out here to deliver us into the hand of the Moabites. And Jehoshaphat is at least wise enough, before jumping on that bandwagon and complaining against Yahweh, to ask whether or not there are any prophets among them, that at least they can inquire of the prophet on behalf of Yahweh what they should do. And Elisha is brought to his attention. Now, what's about to happen is interesting, because you'll notice in reading through the Old Testament, all the way back to the beginning of the Old Testament, from the time there was a king, there's a certain way, a certain etiquette you're supposed to address the king in. And typically the king summons you if he wants to speak to you, and otherwise you don't speak to him. You address him in the most formal possible way that you can. But we'll see here, Elisha, in carrying this mantle of Elijah, is walking around with significant authority, where he's not even brought to the king, that the king has requested him. They come to him and they find him, and then inquire what he thinks. Anyway, brother, if you have stuff you want to add to that, please do.
I kind of got tripped up there. I was reading, because the BSB, it says, it was verse 8. We're saying Jehoram, and it says Joram. But I went to look that up, and I just saw your name before. It says, by the way, that's Derek in Hebrew.
Oh, that's a good eye. That's a good eye.
Yep.
Just to show you guys what he is talking about, you pull up interlinear. My name, as I'm sure you've figured out by now, is Derek, but in Hebrew, it literally means the way or the path. Let's see, where is interlinear? There it is, interlinear. By the way, right here, D-E-R-E-K. It's a different spelling than I do for my name. Yeah, quite literally means the way. Not to say that I'm the way, please.
Yeah.
Christ is the way, the truth, and the life.
Well,
I'm just pointing to him.
It's just kind of strange there. Because I was trying to figure out, like, do we got another king here? Well, what's going on? That's all I got, brother. You want me to continue reading?
Yeah, you can continue reading. Sorry, I was just reading through that passage real quick. I guess we could just read this one out. This is a really straightforward chapter up until we get to the end, but I think I got tripped up because I was overcomplicating it and adding something that wasn't actually in the context. I thought it was implied, but now in re-examining it, I don't think it's implied. So yeah, go ahead, brother. Verse 13.
Elisha, however, said to the king of Israel, "What have we to do with each other? Go to the prophets of your father and of your mother." "No," replied the king of Israel, "for it is Yahweh who has summoned these three kings to deliver them into the hand of Moab." Then Elisha said, "As surely as Yahweh lives, before whom I stand, were it not for my regard for the presence of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, I would not look at you or acknowledge you. But now bring me a harpist." And while the harpist played, the hand of Yahweh came upon Elisha, and he said, "This is what Yahweh says: dig this valley full of ditches. For Yahweh says, you will not see wind or rain, but the valley will be filled with water, and you will drink, you and your cattle and your animals. This is a simple matter in the sight of Yahweh, and he will also deliver the Moabites into your hand. And you shall attack every fortified city and every city of importance. You shall cut down every good tree, stop up every spring, and ruin every good field with stones." The next morning, at the time of the morning sacrifice, water suddenly flowed from the direction of Edom and filled the land. Now all the Moabites had heard that the kings had come up to fight against them. So all who could bear arms, young and old, were summoned and stationed at the border. When they got up early in the morning, the sun was shining on the water, and it looked as red as blood to the Moabites across the way. "This is blood," they exclaimed. "The kings have clashed swords and slaughtered one another. Now to the plunder, Moab." But when the Moabites came to the camp of Israel, the Israelites rose up and attacked them, and they fled before them. So the Israelites invaded their land and struck down the Moabites. They destroyed the cities, and each man threw stones on every good field until it was covered. They stopped up every spring and cut down every good tree. Only Kir Hareseth was left with stones in place, but men with slings surrounded it and attacked it as well. When the king of Moab saw that the battle was too fierce for him, he took with him 700 swordsmen to break through to the king of Edom, but they could not prevail. So he took his firstborn son, who was to succeed him, and offered him as a burnt offering on the city wall. And there was great fury against the Israelites. So they withdrew and returned to their own land.
Okay. So as we talked about, Elisha comes on the scene here and kind of just sneers at Jehoram. He's got no respect, no support for him, doesn't care that he's the king. It's like, hey, what business do I have with you? Why don't you go talk to the prophets of your mother and father, who are Ahab and Jezebel? They always consulted the prophets of Baal. He said, if it wasn't for Jehoshaphat, I wouldn't even look at you. I wouldn't speak to you. Like, I would have nothing to do with you. And this is, I think this is something worth looking into. what we see in Elisha is in the same in Elijah. It's a very strong spirit of discernment. The scriptures tell us not to be mistaken. Bad company corrupts good character. And when you are seeking refinement and seeking the Father, if you are constantly assimilated with people who are dabbling in things which they ought not, it's just a matter of time before you get caught up in the same trap that they are. I mean, it just happens. There's I don't know, maybe a metaphor or whatever. But I learned in grammar school when they were talking about this very thing, bad company corrupting good character. Imagine climbing up on a desk and there's a bunch of people surrounding you trying to pull you off the desk. And you're trying to lift them up. Which one do you think is going to win? The ones that are down below you and pulling you off the desk. Now, maybe you could pull one person up to where you are, but what will most likely happen is that you will get pulled down to where they are at. And that's what happens when you find yourself assimilating with people who practice contrary, especially when these people claim to be believers, much like Jehoram. He is kind of putting on this front and taking down this pillar of Baal, the sacred pillar that his mom and dad had erected, but then just continuing on in idolatry, which is really at its base is the worship of self, is really all it is. So he is not in full submission to the will of Yahweh, not even really in partial submission. And Elisha sees right through it. And much like Elijah, he doesn't hesitate to say the hard thing. Now, King Jehoram has the right and the authority to put him to death right then and there for speaking to the king that way. But notice, even Jehoram, who is serving himself and his own personal interest, he knows better. He knows well enough that like you try to slay a prophet of Yahweh, an intervention will be made and you will be the one who gets destroyed. This is a moral that we've talked about throughout multiple studies, and that Yahweh is capable of defending himself. It says in the scriptures, make no mistake, Yahweh is not mocked. They may get away with it for the moment, but he's always working. He's always working throughout so many generations and centuries, millennium. He exists outside of time, which is a huge thing that people get hung up on. We only know the here and the now, and thus we can not even begin to discern his ways, his works, what exactly he's doing. We don't see it until it's retrospective and a small little piece of his plan has been brought into fruition. And then our minds are blown like, wow, he started working on that before I was even born. It's very, very humbling. And to think that you can fight against his will, like you have free will, but you will be destroyed. It's not a battle that you will win. And that's living in faith. Elisha knows this because he was mentored by Elijah, who demonstrated the same principles to him. And so that's it. This is exactly how he's living. And I think this is a very important part of this chapter, is like you can't underestimate the value of spiritual discernment. I mean, we're not kings, we're not royalty, but it doesn't matter. It's exactly the same in our own lives. being able to discern those who are not beneficial to us spiritually in Yahweh carrying out his will in our lives. I'm not saying you need to cut ties with them, not by any means. That's where ministry is born. But especially for those who claim to be followers of Christ, but then are living for the lusts of the flesh, we have an obligation to go and confront them in a spirit of love. And if they don't receive us, go back again with a second witness. There's a whole protocol to this thing. But then after that, if they will not receive us once we've done all that we are compelled to do scripturally, we have to wash our hands and just surrender them to Yahweh. We continue to pray for them. We don't ever stop loving them. They're our brothers and sisters, and we care for them greatly. But over time, bad company corrupts good character. And we see this demonstrated repeatedly over several thousand years in the Old Testament, and then continuing to perpetuate itself in the New Testament. It's a tale as old as time. Like my grandfather said to me when I was younger, birds of a feather flock together. Show me who your friends are, and I'll tell you who you are. Like I think that's a very important message. This is otherwise a very straightforward chapter. Also, we have here the theme that what Yahweh says he does. He told them he would deliver the Moabites into their hand. He did. He told them dig trenches, and water will be provided in abundance for your soldiers, for your cattle, all the water you need. Done. He said, Elisha said, it's no big thing for Yahweh to do this. But they were also instructed to wipe out every fortified city, to mar, that's what it says in the NASB, but basically destroy every piece of fertile land with stones and cut down every good tree. And stop up all the springs of water. So they were to completely destroy, just as we see in the book of Exodus, Yahweh commands Israel to do throughout all the land of Canaan. Over and over again, he tells them, leave no survivors, unless he says, spare the women or spare the children. It's usually, there's quite a few references of him sending them on a conquest and saying, leave no survivors. And over again, Israel does the thing where they get to like the 85, 90%, and they're like, well, I think that's good enough. And that's a trap that we all fall into. Like we ought to each morning dedicate a portion of time to Yahweh, to be alone with him, to have that quiet time before the day's labors commence. And I'm guilty of this myself. This week was an especially rough one. I fell into the flesh repeatedly. And there were multiple days where I slept in and I didn't get up before my family, before my children, and get into scripture, where I have that period of time in the morning to receive my instructions, to receive my daily bread. And excuse me. Oh, sorry. I just completely lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah, I got it. So what happened here is Israel, Judah, and Moab, or not, and Edom, they conquered all these fortified cities. In the NASB, it says until Kir Hareseth. The way that I interpreted that, it's like they did all except for this last city, and they attacked it a little bit, but they didn't fully carry out Yahweh's instructions to the letter. And they hit that point, they're like, oh, I think this is good enough. And I think that's a dangerous thing. We see that over and over again in the scriptures. We think we have the authority to say, well, that's good enough. We don't have to go any further. There's no way they can come back from that. We got our tribute back. So, why do we need to destroy this beautiful, rich city that's known for its raisin cakes and all its other good stuff? And it's just not how we're called to live as believers. We have to carry out his will to entirety, everything that he commands us to do. And yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what else we get from this chapter. I'm sure I'm missing quite a bit, but that message of like discerning and being obedient in faith to his instruction in our lives.
Yeah, that's what the chapter that you messaged me about yesterday does seem to be about, Elisha, the king of Moab, which his name means deliverance. Like I told you yesterday, you don't really see, a non-Israelite name having a meaning for a king often when you look in Strong's,
Yeah.
But yeah, he tries to get through by, tries to keep winning through. He uses the 700 swordsmen to break through, it says, but they could not prevail. So then he gave his firstborn son, who was to succeed him. And then that's when it ended. That's when the fury turned against the Israelites. So, I mean, it seems a little parabolic with Christ right there again. But yeah, how was not his throne's eternal. So
Yeah. The fact that Jehoram wasn't even serving Yahweh Elohim. It was a lost battle even before it started.
yeah, but he gave up his firstborn son. It's just it seems like a parable.
I would agree to that.
An offering, he was fighting. He was trying to get through by his own works instead of faith, really.
Yep.
And then at the end, he turned to faith and to his God, or whatever, the God of Israel, I guess.
Yeah, we have
because he was saying everything wasn't working. So
there's a cross reference. Like I said, I was trying to make sense of this verse 27. Then he took his oldest son, who was to reign in his place, and offered him as a burnt offering on the wall. And there came great wrath against Israel, and they departed from him and returned to their own land. So in trying to get more context for this, and it's like, why was this great wrath against Israel? They weren't the ones that did that. I initially interpreted that as Yahweh's wrath was against Israel, and I don't think that's the case here.
Nope.
But there's I came across Amos chapter 2 verse 1. Says, thus says Yahweh, for 3 transgressions of Moab and for 4, I will not revoke its punishment, because he burned the bones of the king of Edom to lime. So at some point there, I don't know if this happened in that same battle. I'm not aware right now, without further research, of another battle that happened between Edom and Moab, other than the one where they're like that we just read about. But at some point, they being Moab, the king of Moab, which would have been Mesha, unless that's referring to a different king over Moab, got hold of.
It's Mesha, brother. I looked it up because I was
okay.
saying.
Mesha. So unless that's Mesha and getting a hold of the king of Edom in this battle, I don't know what that Amos chapter 2 verse 1 is referring to.
Another thing that stuck out to me was, why did Elisha ask for a harpist? I don't know.
That, yes, that I did some research on that as well. So we see in the Old Testament, especially a lot in the book of Psalms, David did that. David always had a harp in his hand. And I mean, in this context, it's in the NASB, it says minstrel. Regardless, it's a musical instrument, and he used the tool of music in a spirit of worship. We have that very same thing today. When worship is done in its true and proper form, that is a way to enter into the presence of Yahweh. And we see it in David all throughout the book of Psalms. He's got a harp in his hand, he's writing songs, and as he's playing, these verses would come to him. And in the same way, Elisha is using that same tactic. That was what music was originated for, was for the worship of Yahweh. And unfortunately, Satan, being a chief musician, took it and corrupted it. But it still is affected just the same if you come at it with a pure heart and you're truly looking to adore and worship Yahweh Elohim. You're entering into his presence, and it's a great way to receive guidance and discernment from Yahweh. So I think that's what's being spoken of when he asked for a harp or a minstrel to be brought to him.
Yeah. I think that's the only things that's stuck out that we haven't covered. But
yeah, this chapter, unlike the other studies that we've done so far, is very, very straightforward. Other than that verse 27, it's still like I'm still a little bit confused, saying great wrath came against Israel and they turned away from the battle and returned to their homeland. If they have already destroyed the vast majority of Moab.
I can make that easy for you, I think.
Please, brother.
It's simple. Jehoram never started this war in consulting Yahweh Elohim. Elisha does serve the righteous and one and only Yahweh Elohim. So at that point, they are getting what's needed for this war that Jehoram is fighting. How is he supposed to win? I mean, he's winning a battle, but he wasn't there for Yahweh Elohim.
I think it just goes back to the start, of Jehoram, he did some things, but I mean, he did evil in the sight of Yahweh.
Exactly. He did evil in the sight of Yahweh Elohim.
But I don't to say it's, yeah, there's something there, some meaning that we're not getting. I think.
Yeah,
will be revealed in future chapters.
I think something more that can be said of it as well is clearly when you read Moab is discussed in Jeremiah, it's discussed in Isaiah, it's discussed in Amos, it's discussed frequently throughout the scriptures, and Jeremiah and Isaiah both lamented over Moab. Like their hearts were in a state of just distress and great depression over the plight of Moab. They were in a pretty accursed nation and suffered a very, very heavy loss. They went from, like I said, having a lot of wealth to being the lineage completely wiped out. If you read about them, they no longer exist. There is not a Moabite people in the world today. The land of Moab is no more. The names have been changed. Everything is, I mean, there's a Moab in Utah, which is a whole different story.
They're referred to in prophecy, though, right?
I don't know. Probably, very, very likely. I feel like we read something about it in the book of Isaiah when we were doing our Isaiah study, and maybe it was
I think he does speak of Moab, you know, what's to become of Moab. And I think it's, we tried to figure out who would be the modern day Moab.
Yeah, I remember that. That was, I think it was in, I want to say, no, it wasn't 14, but it was somewhere around there. But yeah, they were not a people that did righteously in the sight of Yahweh. They walked very contrary to his plan, and they were wiped out in light of it. And so what I'm seeing here is a bigger picture context. We have Jehoram, who is clearly pursuing the lusts of the flesh, and he's got just delusions of grandeur. It's like, hey, wait a minute. I remember Moab used to have to pay us tribute since the days of David. But they stopped paying after Ahab died. And Ahaziah didn't do anything about it. But by golly, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to get that tribute back. And he didn't do so on any authority. And the Moabite people were not a spiritually pleasing in the eyes of Yahweh. They were not that people that you want to receive tribute from. So not only is he stepping outside of Yahweh's instruction, not consulting Yahweh at all, but now he's going and plundering wealth that was not ordained by Yahweh for him to take. So I could see that being a scenario too, because I mean, what did Yahweh say? He didn't say go in there and plunder. He didn't say go feast on the riches, go take back what's yours. He said destroy it, destroy all of it, stop up all the streams of water, fell every good tree, mar every wall and every field with stones. And in other words, if all of those things are carried to fruition, that the kingdom of Moab ceases to exist. They have no longer a king or a kingdom or ways to produce food. Like it would just become a desolate place. And that was what Yahweh wanted. But Jehoram, he wanted, I mean, we see he spared Kir Hareseth. He kind of, I see him just like they came up to the walls of this grand fortified city and he starts throwing rocks at it. He's like, oh, there, take that. Okay, we're good. We conquered them. And just is fine with that. And so, I mean, we kind of see a similar thing with King Saul. He was told to wipe out, who was it? Was it the Amalekites? That he was supposed to completely wipe them out, leave no survivors, and all the cattle and everything. And he not only left survivors, but kept all of the choice cattle and brought all these things back into Israel when it was still a united kingdom. And because of it, he encountered judgment from Yahweh because he didn't carry out his will to fruition. And then he tried to make excuses and said, oh, well, I just brought these because they're such choice animals, they would be perfect for sacrifice. And Yahweh, his response was, I desire obedience, not or obedience over sacrifice. And so I see that also being a context for the wrath being occurred against Israel. Because on the one hand, it's like, oh, well, seems like they did what they were supposed to do. But if you read it really for understanding and a contextual understanding, they didn't really follow through on Yahweh's will. What they kind of followed through on was the will of Jehoram and what he wanted, which was tribute, just to acquire more wealth. Anyways, I hope that makes sense. That's just something that struck me, was the story of Saul and his conquest and him not following through with what Yahweh commanded him. And then David, or no, sorry, it was Samuel. Samuel came to him and told him that he would basically he would be disciplined for it. And then he tried to make excuses to Samuel, but Samuel saw right through it. So perhaps it's that along those same lines, like he didn't fully carry it out because he saw the beauty of the city of Kir Hareseth and its produce and its mighty fortified walls and its abundant riches. It's like, well, I'm not going to destroy this. I'm going to keep this for myself. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but I don't think there's much more that we can get out of this chapter today. Anyways, I'm not going to say there is nothing more to take from this chapter. I am sure there is, but yeah, without further study, I don't want to just keep you guys here for a prolonged period of time, not having anything further to offer you on this chapter.
Yeah, I was talking with my mic on mute, but yeah, without further revelation, yeah, I don't think we're gonna get much more than what we've got. I mean, there's some things again with the things that we could. I mean, we know like them being with the water becoming looking like blood and stuff like that. We can go over. Yeah, but we can't really think that'd be answered too. I mean, that's already answered, but future revelation.
All right. Well, should we just go ahead and conclude the stream then, or?
Yeah, I think that's a. I think we covered quite a bit, or a pretty straightforward chapter.
Yeah.
I made it seem a little bit more complicated than it really is, but
All right. I will conclude the stream. We are live Sunday at 11:30. We right now are going through 2 Kings. We'll probably finish this and then move on to something different. Then we also go live for a devotional Wednesday and Friday morning at 5:30 a.m. Eastern time. But yeah, leave us a comment, or I mean, if you see something that we did not cover, please leave it in the comments. Let us know so we can discuss it on another live stream. We are not the utmost authority on the scriptures. None of us are academically certified to be teaching the scriptures, but I kind of pride myself in not having a seminary school degree. So yeah, I mean, we're just trying to be led by the Holy Spirit and have a good time of fellowship and come together to remember the Sabbath. We don't necessarily, the Sabbath may have been Saturday, or what I believe is that it would change regularly because it was based on lunar cycle. But it, as Anthony has pointed out, it's not the specific day, it's the ritual of every week remembering a day of rest and consecrating it to our Father, which we do through fellowship and scripture and prayer and the time of edification. So yeah, we'd love to hear from anyone else, please.
Yeah, that's what I always tell people. They always say, the Sabbath's on Saturday, Sabbath's on Sunday. It's like sometimes, sometimes, but it's really just that day of rest is Sabbath. Well, what's the saying again? Sabbath was
Yes. Sabbath
for-
was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. I think it's, yeah. This time of rest is, we are not in service to the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for us to have rest in Christ.
Yep.
Can't yoke ourselves to, oh my gosh, it's Saturday. There's so many people that are like, Sabbath is Saturday. It just is. It's like, well, no, that's just legalism. Read the scriptures for contextual understanding. And then if you have that contextual understanding, how can you not see when it's very clearly written it's based on the new moon? It's in the Old Testament was known as the lunar Sabbath. So that would change according to the Hebrew, that would change drastically. And even under the Gregorian calendar, it would change pretty drastically. So we don't yoke ourselves up to a specific day, but rather we just remember a day of the week for a time of fellowship, scriptural edification, and trying to just serve Yahweh as he leads us through the Holy Spirit.
Yep. Yep.
I love you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Any listeners that we have that don't catch this live, thank you for hanging in there. Sorry, this was a less than revealing Sabbath Sunday. We've had some pretty incredible revelations that have come through during the study, but nonetheless, the message that we drew from the context is true. Its interpretation is true, and it's sound. So I hope it's encouraging and ministers to you. And until next Sunday, have a blessed day.
Amen.
Amen.